voters out of the electoral process, and they have elections. But the truth is that this is a democracy, and they may have the money, but you have the votes. You know, and you, at the end of the day, you can elect whoever you want. And you know, frequently you have no choice. You have, no matter who candidate there is out there, they're basically an establishment candidate. But for once, in a very long time, we actually have a candidate that represents voters and voter priorities and voter interests. And that's Bernie Sanders. So let me just talk to you a little bit about economic policy, or trickle-down economics, or economic rationalism. So I don't know, maybe you guys are familiar with all of this, but so economic rationalism or trickle-down economics has been the prevailing economic policy in this country for something like 40 years. And economic rationalism basically holds that all that money that we used to collect in taxes from the wealthy, as well as from middle-income Americans, that used to, and also the poor, that used to be put into schools, maintaining our roads, healthcare, social programs for the poor, and various different things. All that money that we used to collect should, in the form of tax breaks, be given to the wealthy investors and the corporations of the United States to invest in our country in a free market manner. And the idea here is that using the free market and using capital in the free market, that they will be able to build the economy, they will be able to grow their business interests, and they will be able to create jobs. But the huge and glaring flaw with this theory is that investors don't invest for voter benefit. They're not investing for charitable purposes. They're not creating jobs just because you need jobs. They're creating jobs if they can't avoid it. They're creating jobs if they possibly have to, or if they really have to. They're creating jobs at Walmart. If they could, they would create jobs in Bangladesh. If they could have your job done by a robot, even better. I mean, there's the idea that putting that money that we used to put into all of our schools and things into the hands of wealthy investors has been 40 years of eroding the infrastructure and the social fabric of America, really. And that's what Bernie Sanders is talking about when he talks about the billionaire class, the investor class, and the corporations of America. Those, you know, it's not perhaps that they're a bunch of evil people, but it's just the process of prioritizing profit that leads to this erosive changes of our democracy as well as our society. So in addition to that, economic rationalism, trickle-down economics would have you believe that there is no role for regulation of any industry or business. And so, for example, during the Clinton years, the regulations of the banks were taken away, signed, or gotten rid of by Bill Clinton. And not all that long after that, the banks, and because the banks claimed that they were able to do, you know, they've learned their lessons and they're able to regulate themselves, and they're better behaviors now. They're part of society now. Not very long afterwards, in 2008, as many of you I'm sure remember, we had a huge subprime mortgage housing disaster in the United States, and as a result of that deregulation, we had the Great Recession, which we are only now digging ourselves out of, and that's been a terrible thing for many Americans. So that's deregulation. In addition to that, there's also the idea that businesses should not have to have any. They should not necessarily have to clean up the pollution they create, and so also for the last 40 years, the fossil fuel industry in the United States has had a free ride to pollute the atmosphere in a reckless and extremely destructive way, despite the fact that they knew about global warming and they knew about the consequences of polluting our atmosphere with carbon dioxide. Despite this, because again of the money that they have put into the political process, we have been fed for 40 years this whole denialist rhetoric which comes from conservative politicians that would have you believe that there is no such thing as global warming, that there's nothing to see, there's nothing to worry about here, move along. And this has led to a crisis in our climate and has left us with something along the lines of an emergency that has to be dealt with in the very near future in a very aggressive way. So because Bernie Sanders recognizes these things and is standing up to do something about them, I support Bernie Sanders. And let me tell you, I have just one more thing to tell you, and this is, so big money out there in the political process would love you to believe that there is no way to win an election other than with big money, the very biggest of money. And This election has been an eye-opener, I think, for many people in America for two reasons. Number one, Jeb exclamation point flunked early, despite the fact that he had more money than anybody has ever known what to do with. He could have done anything with that money. Nonetheless, he was kicked out of town. And in addition to that, which I have to say that I'm quite happy about, but in addition to that, Bernie Sanders, despite having almost no money to start with, has only grown in strength through this political process and through this Democratic primary. And it's all because of small donations. It's not that big money doesn't have any role in politics. It definitely does have a role in politics. And for people like Hillary Clinton, who is a lawyer, lawyers are employed by corporations or by wealthy individuals to do a job. And although Hillary Clinton isn't strictly speaking employed by Goldman Sachs or Walmart or the fossil fuel industry, nonetheless, when she collects campaign contributions, it's not like after the election is come and gone that she doesn't owe those people a favor. Goldman Sachs is a company that invests for profit, and when they put money into Hillary Clinton's campaign, they are doing that for a profit.
Yep.
And after she is elected, then they make their profit. And that's at the expense of voters.
No.
And so for that reason, I definitely don't support Hillary Clinton, besides for the fact that she voted to invade Iraq, which I also tremendously, I find very appalling.
Yes.
But in the same vein, I guess one of the things that has occurred to me through this political cycle is that, Goldman Sachs invests in politics and they give Hillary Clinton money and they expect a return. But you guys also can invest in politics. Big money would love you to believe that your role in politics is very limited and your contributions don't go anywhere. But that is not the case. You can invest in politics, and you can in your investment in Bernie Sanders, contributing to his campaign, is an investment in your future. It's even an investment in your future economic prosperity, honestly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And furthermore, on the same topic, investing in your unions and joining your unions is also in your economic best interests, because the unions built the middle class in this country.
Yes. I think we got a new government.
So, for all those reasons, I think Bernie Sanders is on to something very important. But one other thing that I want to point out to you is, so this political process has drawn many people into politics that might not otherwise have been in the least bit interested and have felt very alienated from the whole process for a long time. But you need to stay in the political process. Everybody in this audience should run for office, and everybody in this audience should gather their resources together and make an effort to change our political structure, because number one, if Bernie Sanders is elected, he needs allies. All of you. Number two, if he's not elected, you ought to be in office carrying his agenda forward. And number three, the more people that are out there talking about these political priorities, the more it begins to seem like mainstream, middle class, ordinary American voter priorities, which is what they really are. Big business, big money, corporate America, the billionaires, they would love to make you believe that this is sort of an extremist fringe movement. But it's not, it's just us.
Okay.
And we are the voters of America.
Yep.
So anyway, I support Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
You guys are doing great work.